My name is Tom Freeborg with Rise Up and Fight Ministries. We're a ministry that's committed to the mental health and well-being of first responders. Year after year, first responder suicides more than double line of duty deaths. This is a problem. It's the leading cause of death for firemen, which is why we're here. We're here getting real stories from real people in the hopes that it will benefit somebody out there. But today we're here with Pastor Lee Kachner. He's a doctor, Dr. Lee.
Not a medical doctor, doctor of ministry.
Right.
No.
And we're here to talk about the spiritual side of healing. There's a mental piece and there's a physical piece, right? We got to heal our mind, we got to heal our body. But we also have to heal our spirit. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing worse than a man or a woman with a broken spirit.
No, I would totally agree because there's no wholeness there. I mean, if you can have, it's kind of, I look at it like you can have this nice house that has a good exterior that everybody drives by and like, oh, I wish I lived in that house. But what they don't understand is in that house it's got leaky pipes and uneven floors and it's all falling apart. And that's kind of like that spiritual side, like the inside is important.
Well, I can tell you, Lee. I mean, there were many times in my life where, I was circling the drain. Mm-hmm. I just talked about nothing worse than a man with a broken spirit. And you were really there for me 7 years ago when I was going through my storm, and I really appreciate you. Yeah. And you kept my nose in it, and you kept me on the path that I needed to be on, and I really, really appreciate that. What's it like being a pastor?
Well, there's good days and there's bad days. I think that it's, I talk to people all the time about this, like that's not my job. Because if being a pastor is my job, I would have quit a long time ago. It's a calling. God has called me to do this work, just like God's called you to be, a chaplain and to do this work in which you're doing. Being a pastor, it's every day is a little bit different. Some days you're thinking like, man, what am I doing? I don't really have a whole lot to do. And then other days you're like, I ain't got enough time to do everything I need to do. But understanding that the greatest message ever given has been given, through God, through His Son, Jesus Christ, and it's our duty and our job to just take that, our calling to take that out into the world. But not only that, is those who are experiencing that new life and that rebirth through that relationship with God, it's understanding that it's not as if you have this one-time experience and everything's good. So obviously the Bible uses the visual of a shepherd and sheep. So pastors are shepherds, and there's sheep that are in the fold. And sheep are animals that they need led around. And if they're not led around, they have a tendency to wander. And wandering sheep get into trouble. And sometimes they can walk off the edge, or sometimes they can get devoured by wolves. So just being a shepherd, I've always kind of joked that if I were to draw a picture, and I'm no artist or anything, but if I were to draw a picture of what I think a shepherd is, I picture this shepherd standing on this like a precipice of a hill and looking at his sheep, and he's got the shepherd's staff in one hand, the staff that's got the crook on the end and everything. That way you can pull the sheep back if they need, but it's also got a little bit of a little hooky thing there that if you need to prod them along or poke them along, you can do that as well. So I picture the shepherd on the hillside with the shepherd's staff in one hand, and honestly, the other hand is the shepherd's holding an AR-15, and the reason being. And it's not because I just want, I'd be a tough guy. No, it's the reason being is sometimes you've got to protect the sheep, and you're protecting them from the wolves. You're protecting them from the those on the outside. So you got to shoot the wolves. You got to get rid of the wolves. And sometimes you got to protect the sheep from themselves, and that's where the staff really comes in. So what it's like being a pastor is really just it's just a devotion to the sheep in which God has brought into this flock. And some days are, man, sky high. Some days you're like, I'm all alone trying to shepherd these sheep that don't want to be led anywhere. So it's a struggle. I mean,
do you ever like run into people putting like unreasonable or unfair expectations on you because you are Pastor Lee?
Yes. There is one person in particular that comes to mind that he puts a tremendous amount of pressure on me, and his name's Lee. I mean but honestly, I put more pressure on myself than I allow other people to, because I look at it this way: I'm not responsible. I'm not held accountable in the sense of my role by the people. I'm held accountable by God, and I want to make sure that I'm right, so then that I can. Because if you don't have a healthy shepherd, you're not going to have a healthy flock. So I mean, there's always people saying that a pastor should do this, or a pastor shouldn't do this. A pastor shouldn't have tattoos, or a pastor shouldn't drink a beer, or whatever. There's all these stereotypical mindsets that people have, but the reality of it is none of it really comes from what's rooted and grounded in Scripture. So I have a philosophy that I use with a lot of people, and I tell people, and it's a I don't care philosophy. So, and what I mean is, there's two different types of I don't care. There's a damaging type of I don't care, like I just don't care about you, and you're a piece of crap and all this. But no, then there's another I don't care that is like, I'm just not going to let you bother me. I'm not going to let what you think of me and what you think I should do or shouldn't do, or your perspective of me really influence what I'm to do. I care what God thinks first and foremost. So there's a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions. Opinions are like, buttholes. Everybody's got one. Some stink
right.
more than others.
Right.
But the idea is that I just not going to let it bother me. And when you could take that's part of the healing process, and just dealing with stuff is like, what are you going to let bother you? What is it that you're going to spend that mental energy? And I would even say that spiritual battle energy in which you have, like what are you going to expend all that energy on? Is it going to be some nincompoop that thinks that you should, sit in an office in a suit and tie all day long, or is it someone that you see is hurting and that needs this help, and is not just they need that, they're wanting help? And I would say that would be, something else is when we're dealing with people, there's a lot of people that need help, but there's not as many people who want help. And I'm sure you deal with that all the time. And that's tough.
Absolutely.
That's real tough.
Right. I run into guys, they don't want to emote.
Mm-hmm.
They have this, like, their ego is this fortress.
Mm.
And you can see it. It's almost like an impenetrable wall,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's tough to break through. And they're struggling, because I will see them sitting there in the training room,
mm-hmm.
and their leg is bouncing like a chicken leg.
Yeah.
And they get, I'm fine. Their leg is just a mile a minute, you know what I mean? No, you're not fine, brother.
Right.
You're not fine at all. Like, I see it on you.
Yeah, what are you not dealing with?
Yeah, I can see it on your face,
mm-hmm.
I was doing a training on marriage and divorce in the fire service, and a guy just got up and walked out. Like, he just got triggered. And immediately, I want to take offense to that.
Yeah.
Like, well, geez, But then I got to thinking, well, there was something I said
mm-hmm.
that hit home with that guy.
Yeah.
And it was uncomfortable. And he didn't want to sit in that crappy diaper.
Right.
So he got up and he left.
Yeah.
But it's tough sometimes to get through the egos. But one thing I've noticed, if I'm with a group of guys,
mm-hmm.
and we're doing a training or we're talking about things, all it takes is one guy to be vulnerable first.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as that guy, and I'm always looking for that guy, and I'll try to pick that guy out beforehand, and then
mm-hmm.
kind of poke at him, just to get him
mm-hmm.
to be vulnerable. And then as soon as that happens, the walls come down.
Yeah.
And then people start talking, which is really what we need to do for healing. You know, I met with a kid a few weeks ago, a firefighter, and he ran a really bad call. And he was telling me, you know, this mother had rolled over on her newborn in bed and killed the newborn.
Oh, man.
And what really bothered him on the call was that the mom or the dad, they didn't even come to the hospital. And that was what was really took root in his brain. And he was having that activated thought loop, you know, over and over and over again. And he couldn't stop it. And he goes to the guys on his shift. And he starts to talk about it. And they tell him, we're not going to talk about this again, are we? Right? And that's what he got. And that's the stigma that we need to drop, like in the fire service. And I mean, it's just, the kid needed to talk about it, right? And he called me and I met him for breakfast and we talked about it. But there's a lot of walls in the fire service, you know, and sometimes it's hard to break through those walls.
So on these walls and everything, I mean, even the emotional, that intimacy, letting them in, what is it like with, you know, religious or spiritual walls that people put up, or barriers, or even maybe the people don't put up, but they're inside of it's kind of like a unwritten rule or something like that, is it?
Yeah. So the thing, like, you're in a government agency, right? So you have to, you know, kind of walk a fine line there. And you have to be careful, you know. I mentioned prayer and spirituality in some of my trainings, and how important that is, because even like Save a Warrior, you know, they focus on the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. It's important. You need all three to heal and be completely whole. You know, but yeah, a lot of times, you know, you can kind of spot the spiritual guys, too. But
are they the guys that are walking around with the Bibles?
No. No, but you can just tell, because they have a peace about them. You know, you know, some of the questions they ask tend to be more deeper questions, emotional questions. You know, but the thing, you know, again, in being a chaplain too, you know, there's a fine line there, like between like evangelizing people and you know, what denomination are you, and like, you know, you can't go there, right? Constitutionally, but at the same time, you know, believers will usually tell you if they're a believer. You know, they'll see like a cross on my bracelet or even on the patch, and then they're more forthcoming, you know. But I did have the honor of helping bring somebody to the Lord. This guy, I thought there was no hope. No hope at all. And I had seen him about 6 months later, and he was all excited. And he came up to me and he said, you know, he said, I've been reading the Bible and the New Testament. He's like, I'm not Catholic. That was the very first thing he said. I was like, no, whatever, that's fine. You know, he goes, but he's starting to read, and I was so happy. And he said, you know, I'm a believer. And really, ultimately, Lee, like, why are we here on this planet? Like, what's the point? Like, these are all important questions, you know? And I think, you know, spirituality, especially, you know, my faith in Jesus, answers a lot of those questions. You know, you want to talk about a purpose-driven life, all of a sudden you have a purpose in your life, you know? And when you can make that about helping others, which firemen and dispatch, I mean, that's why they got into the job, right? They're altruistic people by nature.
And, you know? and they're going into situations every time that are, it's not as if they're going to a puppy party and, you know, it's going to be all happy. And like they're going into some of the darkest situations.
Yes, the deep bowels of hell sometimes. You know, I have seen, you know, Jordan Peterson, I saw a little spiel he did on, you know, PTSD and trauma. And he said it's not so much the act that traumatized you. He said it's the malevolence behind that act that traumatizes you. And when you deal with a truly malevolent person,
Yeah.
and you see that darkness in their eyes, right? That messes with you. And like I said, I've seen, body parts. I've seen eviscerations and guts and blood and all that stuff. That never bothered me. When I was in the fire service, what really bothered me was that malevolence, right? You see terrible things like you can't believe people would do to each other, or things you can't believe a father would do to a child, or a mother would do to a child, or a daughter would do to an elderly parent, and when you see that evil, firsthand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it gets to you, and all my issues with PTSD, and I call it the darkness.
Oh, yeah.
For that reason, right? Because, and I've talked to other people that suffer, and they all say the same thing. It's like your world is just your perception of the world. It's like this dark gray, like it's hard to articulate. And the best way I could do it was, if you ever saw the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, that movie was shot with all these filters, right, on the camera. And just the world just looked dark and dirty and dingy and black. Like that's like the darkness, And that was always the hardest part of the job. It was,
That's where you need to make sure you have that light shining in. And that's my, obviously, what I am so excited about, or what I'm so excited about with what you're doing, is like you're bringing the light into those dark places. And when you bring the light into those dark places, you can illuminate. Yeah, you're going to see things that might need addressed, or do need addressed, but it's going to bring light, and it's going to bring hope, and hopefully happiness and joy and everything. So bringing light into it, and I mean, the Bible tells us that man loves darkness more than he loves the light. A lot of those people, they don't want that light to come in. They like staying in that dark. And I think that, I'm sure that you've probably encountered that with people.
Absolutely.
And it's just, you feel terrible for them.
I do. And when I see a guy struggling with booze, or, they're going through a divorce, and they're really, and you ask them about it, and you try to talk, and you get, no, I'm fine. No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, it's not. And I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You're wearing it.
Oh, yeah.
And, a lot of people don't know the divorce rate in the fire service is 80%. Law enforcement, it's 85.
Really?
Every cop I know is on their second or third marriage.
Wow.
Wow,
that's
and
nuts.
Just about every cop I know is a case of beer drinker a day. Right? They're self-medicating.
Wow, yeah.
Right? So if we could replace that, the alcohol, right? If we could replace the booze or the gambling, I was talking to a fire lieutenant one day, and he openly admitted, he said, I'm addicted to gaming. And it never hit me.
Like video games?
Yeah, video games, right?
Oh, dang. Okay.
And he goes, and I kind of looked at him a little side-eyed. I was like, what's the problem, man? You know what I mean? I'm addicted to Oreo cookies. Is it that bad? But no. He told me this. He goes. It's affecting my life, right? And I guess that would be the demarcation of where it becomes a problem, right? When it's starting to spill over into your life, And he was very vulnerable and open about it, but. That's another thing I see in the fire service. A lot of people don't want to address.
Yeah.
And here's an alarming statistic. And this number is underreported, right? Because who's going to admit to that, this? But 58% of firemen admit to dangerous, reckless binge drinking.
50%.
58.
58%. Wow.
That number's higher.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Who's going to admit to that?
Yeah.
40, it was something and I can't remember, but it was 40 or 42% of paramedics have admitted to drug use. So again, that number is underreported.
Oh,
and it's a lot higher, right?
Wow.
And I go back to, there was a Nicolas Cage movie about an EMT in New York.
Okay.
What was the name of it? Martin Scorsese did it, Bringing Out the Dead.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, this movie was really, really spot on to like the
Was it a
world
good
of
movie?
EMS. Oh yeah, it was very
Even
dark.
with Nicolas Cage in it.
Yeah, right. Well, I got to say, it was probably the most accurate depiction
Okay.
of the job. It wasn't like
Okay.
what's the big one? Backdraft. And it's all hokey. And
Oh yeah.
they're
yeah,
kissing on top of the fire truck, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no, this was like he's like going to a party and getting pills, and you know what I mean? And
Oh,
then
wow.
he's in the ER in the middle of the night in New York City, and it's just chaos. You know what I mean? And there's a funny scene in there where he's late and he wants fired, and his boss won't fire him. He's like, nobody gets fired, Frank. And then Frank goes, well, I quit. He goes, you promised you'd fire me if I was late again, That's the job.
Just trying to get out,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, it's a good movie, and you should check it out. But it's a very dark job.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people don't realize is you're not only are you sacrificing your body, potentially your life,
Mm-hmm.
but you're sacrificing your marriage
Mm-hmm.
and your brain at the same time. And there's nothing you can do about the brain because those stress hormones, they're going to come.
Yeah.
And when they do, they're going to wreak havoc on your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're getting those stress hormones in such a high amount, and we're talking about cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, I call it the bad stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it will literally change the physiology of your brain.
Yeah.
Which is why these guys are killing themselves. Two things happen. One is your hippocampus shrinks.
Mm-hmm.
And already with PTSD, you got a mishmash of memories and emotions that are all incorrect, and you got this storm going on in your hippocampus. You can't make a distinction between past and present, danger, safe. You get caught in these thought loops, and then you start having this, like self-deprecating thinking towards yourself. And another thing happens is the front wall of your prefrontal cortex thins, and that's where your impulse control is.
Yeah.
So as that wall is thinning, you're losing your impulse control.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're going to sprinkle in some alcohol,
Right.
maybe a fight with your wife,
Mm-hmm.
and you have no impulse control,
Yeah.
and you go upstairs and you blow your brains out.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. And it's the perfect storm of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And one thing that I really, this is probably the hardest part of what I do. I can talk about PTSD, the brain, all day long. That's fine. It's really easy. I can talk about divorce and marriage and addiction. Really easy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get into the spiritual side of things
Yeah.
with responders, that's where it becomes really hard.
Why do you think that it's harder on the spiritual side?
Well, I think it's twofold.
Okay.
One is obviously they're worried about their peers at work. They're worried about the agency. Everyone, even though this isn't in the Constitution anywhere, everyone is under this impression that there has to be this separation from church and state, right?
Yeah.
And it's really BS because it's really not anywhere in the Constitution.
Well, not in the way in which people think. It's actually opposite. And
it's to protect the church from the state.
And it was actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a letter that Benjamin Franklin wrote or something. So it's not necessarily in the penning of it. It was I can't, and don't quote me on that. I think it's like some kind of commentary type or an observation of what they were doing and everything. And he said it would be, it'd behoove us to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's really designed to keep the state out of the church.
Exactly.
But a lot of people, they have this preconceived notion.
So there's a stigma that if they bring up anything, that they'll be...
Right, either ostracized, ridiculed, or potentially written up. Or, Joey's talking with that chaplain. Mm-hmm. They're talking about Jesus, and I'm offended.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotcha.
And they can make that case. So there's that. And then also, I think sometimes when you bring up spirituality with people and they clam up, right? I think a lot of times they know deep down inside where they need to be
Mm-hmm.
or potentially should be,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think kind of a basic human reaction in that instance is just, boom, wall.
Yeah.
Right? And you being a pastor, I'm sure you encounter that. As soon as someone finds out you're Pastor Lee, probably a wall whoosh, comes right up.
Oh yeah. I don't
and then
lead
they're not
with that.
themselves, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm wondering too that as someone is encountering, because I have a theory myself when it comes to encountering people, not necessarily in your field, but just in general. When you talk to someone about faith, spirituality and faith, they'll kind of revert, especially if they're like our age or something. They'll revert back to what they were taught as a kid or something. And then they have this mindset that it's a certain way, or it's not a certain way, or it's important, or it's not important. And that's kind of like this position. They have a presupposition of like this conversation in which we're going to have. So they take and they don't let you in. And the reason that they don't let you in is because you might move the furniture around. And if you move the furniture around, then they're not going to know how to walk in the dark. Because they're walking around, and it's like you walk around in your house at nighttime.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah, but if somebody moves the furniture around, then you're going to trip over it. So if you let someone in, they might do that. And I think that the understanding, this comes back where the light, the spiritual aspect, the faith aspect, where Christ comes in, is he's the light of the world. So he comes into that darkness and he illuminates the room. So not if, but when furniture is moved around to the proper place, you can navigate that. And that's where people, like, they're afraid that if all right, furniture's going to be moved, I'm going to trip, but they don't understand, like, with the light, you're going to see what needs to be moved and where it needs to be moved. So there's really no fear in it other than I love the great theologian Steven Seagal that writes, I think it was in A Time to Kill, where he says, anticipation of death is worse than death itself. And that's a good line for just life. Like you worry so much about something, but the actual act of whatever it is that's happening is not nearly as bad as the worry and everything. Kind of goes back to that, the malevolent idea. What's a malicious onset of the situation? Like, that's worse than the situation itself.
Absolutely.
So I think that people are just they're so afraid of things being changed. People don't like change. I don't care who says it. No one really likes change. Everybody, there's a good analogy too, is like when we're talking about faith is bringing Christ into our life, and you picture a stool. On that stool is whoever is ruling your life, whoever's in charge, like whatever, whoever's on that stool, whatever they say goes. Well, we bring Christ in, and we try to share this stool. Like, give me one butt cheek on this stool, and I'll give you one butt cheek, Jesus. Like, but that's not how it works. Like, we understand, like, we got to let him sit on the stool and just guide us, and be okay, and be willing to be guided. And that's, I think, the spiritual element of healing and everything is that we have to have our faith in Christ, in understanding, like, his way is going to lead us to healing. Like, he's the great healer, the great physician. Like, he has that power. That's what he does. But what we're so reluctant to follow his way. We want to sit on that stool, and we want to do it our way, and our way sucks, and we're jacking things up, and then we're saying, God, why aren't you here? Well, he's here. It's just you're not letting him sit on the stool. And the whole healing aspect is let him sit on the stool and just follow what he says. How is he guiding you through life? Where are these moments where what furniture needs to be moved around so you don't trip over it? I mean, like, what is this? What obstacles are in your life? What unresolved conflicts in which do you have, and how can they be resolved? So that spiritual element is huge in the wholeness of, that serve what you guys are doing. I do have a secret, though.
Okay.
I don't know. Did I ever tell you that I was an EMT when I was in the Marine Corps?
No.
Yeah.
No, but I was going to ask you about your stint in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, well,
that was coming up.
Yeah, I was in the Marine Corps. I was I was in an experimental squadron for helicopters and everything. We did like testing and all this stuff. Real fun, real good. But I on my own time, like outside of when I wasn't working on base, on my off time, I was a volunteer EMT. So down in North Carolina, they have the fire and the rescue are separate. Ours was right next door to each other, but there you had the fire department and the rescue squad. I ran with the rescue squad. Did all my national certifications, all that stuff. And mind you, at the time, I'm 19, 20 years old, something like that. The first call I went out on was a call where there's 4 guys. They just got out of jail, and they were just drinking, driving, whatever. They hit a tree, burst into flames, didn't get out. Crispy critters. All right, very first call. So we waited till the fire department put out the fire, and they cleared the scene and all that good stuff. So me being, the probie, the rookie or whatever, I was tasked with the retrieval of all of this. I mean, and you've dealt with that.
Yeah.
Hey, there's his foot. You put that in the bag, and it was at the time it was just okay. I mean, I don't have a weak stomach or anything like that, and so I did it. No big deal. Seen other things as well. My time in the service, but that bothered me. And here's the funny way in which it bothered me. It bothered me because it didn't bother me. So, and what I mean is, I called my mom because my mom's she works in surgery and anesthesiologist or whatever. I don't know. Works in surgery. So I called her up after this happened. I'm like, telling her about it, and she's like, "Well, okay, what do you think about it?" I'm like, "It doesn't bother me." And mind you, we had these right after they had this big meeting at the firehouse and giving like basically what you're doing at the firehouse, and there were people just breaking down, and it was, and I'm just sitting there like, what's
wrong with me?
And that's exactly it. Like, so I told my mom, like, it doesn't bother me, and I'm bothered by it not bothering me. And she didn't have any answer. So I did that for a few years, and that was always in my mind. Not that I didn't have flashbacks of the bodies or anything, and it just didn't bother me. I did that for a few years, and then when I got married, we moved, so I was out of that area right there. So I just, I quit doing all that and spending time with my wife, and now the new baby and everything. But there were some years like it bothered me that didn't bother me, and I did exactly what you were saying about case of beer. Like I would come home from work and pick up a case of beer on the way home. That's all I did until next day. Got up, drove to base, then came home, did the same exact thing. I did that for years. Even after I got out of the Marine Corps, I got out of the Marine Corps in 2002. I was a functioning alcoholic all the way up until 2007. And I'm telling you this because it was in 2007 that I was outside doing yard work, drunk off my keister. My brother-in-law calls me and says, "Hey, we've got a baseball team and we need somebody else to, we need a sub or whatever." And I said, "Well, I'll do it. I'm smashed drunk, whatever." I go to tell my wife, and like in that moment of having that phone call and then going in the house, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I heard a clear voice from God saying, "You need to get your butt into church." And that was it. So Easter of 2007, actually I came to this church right here because this is a church that I grew up in this church. It's funny, I actually have pictures there we found yesterday of me as a little kid here. But I came here, and it was when I came, I was listening to the message, all the stories and everything that I heard growing up. I knew all of the Bible stories and everything, but I'm still dealing with this, like, none of that evil and all that. It doesn't bother me. But it was almost as if I was comfortable with it. So,
like you were saying, people that are comfortable in the darkness.
exactly. I was just
Yeah.
comfortable. So I continued on. I was still drinking, doing whatever, but we started going to church every Sunday, and it just hit me. I was at that time I was driving truck, and I was driving from here in Edinburgh down to Charleston, West Virginia every night. That was just down and back. That was my job. One night, it was, God smacked me. All the stuff that I knew in my head, it dropped into my heart. And I didn't just know things then, I believed that. So when I say all that, and it wasn't until then where I let the light in. And when I let the light in, not just my head of thinking about God things, but let God into my heart, and now I have a relationship with Jesus, and He's illuminating these things. There was a lot of furniture that needed to be moved around in there. And as things are moved around, I'm able to deal with like these, this problem, this. Why was I not affected by this? Well, I just numb to that.
Right.
And so through the years, I mean, granted, that's been 17, 18 years ago now, but it was that moment that I came to Christ, and when I came to Him and just gave Him, like, all right, I'm not just giving you my head, I'm giving you my heart. And the light has been shining ever since. And it wasn't long after that when God called me into ministry, and I've been here over 15 years now. But
it changes your life.
Oh, I was
you become a new creation. You
Oh,
literally do.
100%. 100%. And I felt healed. And I know it's not all about feelings and everything, but no, it wasn't just a thought I was. No, I feel whole. And it's a great feeling, but it's a hope in which I have. I mean, before that, there's no hope. After that, I got hope. Like, the worst thing that could happen. Now I look at those instances, like that's terrible. But I'm more concerned about how the people in those situations are dealing with that. Are they dealing with it as Paul says in 1 Thessalonians? Like, are they dealing with it as people who have hope, or those who don't have any hope? And when you deal with these traumatic instances and situations, and you have no hope in your life, that's going to drive down that road and make those statistics go
100%
up even more.
Yeah, there was a study that was done with rats. And I don't know if you've read about this or not, but they had a control group of rats. And I mean, this sounds kind of sinister.
Yeah.
They would put a rat in a bucket of water. The rat would swim as long as it could, and then whoop, drowned. Right? So they did this with the control group of rats, and I don't know really how long they lasted, 30 seconds a minute. So then what they started is they took another control group of rats, and they put them in a bucket of water again, and they were swimming. And right before the rat was about to succumb and drown, they would rescue the rat, take him out of the bucket. Right? So now they had all this control group of rescued rats, right? So then they did it again. They put them in the bucket of water. And they found that these rats swam 3 times longer than the first group. Yeah. And the only conclusion from the study was that it was hope that kept them alive. You know?
Yeah.
And when you're in the darkness and you have no hope, I mean, you're pretty much at DEFCON 5 at that point, and you're just a trigger pull away from ending your life, And I got to tell you, one thing my faith has done for me in Jesus is I have 2 things, peace and hope in my life. Regardless, I mean, bombs could be blowing up around me, and I can handle that.
You've handled quite a few bombs in your life.
I have,
right?
actually, yeah. And, and I can tell you, I wouldn't be alive if I didn't have my faith. Yeah. Because I wouldn't have that hope.
Right.
That little bit of hope.
Yeah.
One thing I struggle with when I get in those moments of darkness and, I start thinking about suicide sometimes, it would just be easier and I can be with the Father in paradise, in heaven. That sounds a lot better than this crappy world that we live in, you know? Sometimes that can be enticing, right? But then I have to remember that there will be a time for that. And that God is not done with me yet, you know? And that I have to keep pressing forward.
Yeah.
And it's scary because I was talking to a fireman one day. He says to me, he says, you know, I just tell myself, if life ever gets real bad or my wife leaves me or what I lose my job, he goes, I can just kill myself. And he goes, that gives me comfort. And Lee, I got to tell you, I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't know.
He has no understanding of the afterlife in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah, because like if you think that if you think the answer is taking your own life, what you're saying is, I'm going to sit in the seat of God, and I'm going to do what I want to do. If they have no understanding of what happens, I mean, the Bible is very clear that everyone's going to face judgment, and you're going to face the entrance into heaven, or the separation from God and eternal damnation and torment in hell. I know that people don't like to hear that, but that's the reality. And when you don't think, I don't believe in that, well, you need to, because this book in which we have, I don't believe in the Bible. This is the most reliable source of information we've ever had in all of human history. This is what God said. This is His communication. His letter to us. This writings of like, here's that. You want peace. You want hope in your life. Here you go. This is how it happens. It's in me, and you know who I am and have a relationship with me. This is how you do this. So if people say that I just kill myself and everything's going to be good, well, they either have a warped understanding of a Christian hope, like I'm going to kill myself and be with the Father, like you were saying, and that'll be okay. And I'll address that in a second. Or they have this, they don't believe in an afterlife. They believe in the annihilation theory, like I'm dead and poof, I'm dust, I'm gone, nothing. But that's not true, because you do. We're not just a body who has a soul. We're, as C.S. Lewis says, we're a soul who has a body. Like that's who we are. Like we can cut off limbs and stuff like that and still be the same person in our soul. Like that's that understanding that there is a reality that is on the inside. That I always call it, we have the material and the immaterial. That immaterial part, that our soul is going to live forever. And then when Christ comes back, we'll be reunited with our bodies and we'll live physically. But understanding that soul is where, that's that connection piece. So when people don't have a clear understanding of how God works, like, and I'm not saying like I have it all figured. No. I can read, so I read a lot and understand that this is what God says. But when we don't have a clear understanding, that taints our decision making process. So you were saying about having those times you had, like, right, just take my life and I'll just go be in heaven. The Apostle Paul, who wrote 13 books of the New Testament, he said those same words. He says to live is Christ, to die is gain. Exactly, and he wrestles with this understanding, like, it would be so much better to be out of this body and with Jesus, right? Yeah. It's so much better to be out and be in heaven, be in paradise, right? But he says, and he's writing to the church here in Philippi, I think it is, in Philippi. So in the book of Philippians, when he says this, he said, "But for your sake, I'm going to stay in the body. Like I'm not going to go blow my head off and go be no. I have a purpose, and God has a plan for me still." And that's what I love. Like what you're doing right now. Like, yeah, you could go blow your brains out and go be with Jesus, but that's kind of selfish. That's what you would. That's just an escape. No, God has you here for a reason. Like what you're doing with this whole ministry and this whole nonprofit and everything. Like God has a plan for you. So yeah, we can have a delusion, a delusion at sometimes, or an ill-motivated thought in the sense of, yeah, it'd be better to go. Yeah, it is. It's going to be awesome one day when we're, in the new heaven and the new earth, and like all this has happened. Like, yes, it's going to be awesome. But until then, what are we doing? Well, let's do what God wants us to do, and that's for me, that's comforting. Like if you have breath in the body, there's hope for the soul. I always say that. So if you have breath in your body, no matter where you're at, God can still use you. So taking the reins and trying to be God it doesn't fare well for anyone. So
well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because I'm a new chaplain.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to get this question.
Okay.
And I know it's dicey, right? So if I'm talking with someone who lost, a spouse, lost a firefighter to suicide, or a mom loses a child to suicide, or whatever, right? Are they going to heaven? Are they in heaven, right? And I know I'm going to get this question. And I've been really wrestling with this, like, and you being obviously a doctor of pastoral counseling, I wanted to ask you, what your best take would be on that.
Well, I've dealt with this many different times, and it depends on the situation. What I try to do is just kind of get a little bit of background of the person that died. Whether it's suicide, whether it's a car accident, whatever it is. So you have the family members that are left here, and they have departed. Whatever other person, they departed. So I try to just get a kind of like, what kind of person was this? What's some background, and I don't come straight out and say, well, did they have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Well, that's what I'm getting at. But the way in which I go about it is just trying to pick up on clues. Because in those situations, you can be there is a nail, and you can try to be a hammer, and you're just going to do damage. And that's not being, you're not
That's my fear, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not it. It's letting God give you, in that moment, the words in which to say. You're going to have to do ahead of time before that. Like, this is why study and having a good relationship with God before you enter all this is important. Because if you try to enter into a spiritual situation like this and then all of a sudden say, oh, hey, God, help me out. Well, he's going to, like, oh, no, you thought that you had it all figured out before. Now you need me. He doesn't abandon us. And I'm not saying that at all. So, but what I do is I try to pick up on things. If I don't come to a conclusion and just hearing some stories and everything that I'm pretty sure, or there is an opportunity to, like, maybe they did have a relationship, maybe they weren't the best Christian, maybe they weren't some spiritual giant, maybe they're just a spiritual infant where they had enough faith to believe, but they never were discipled or anything to grow in that faith. So maybe there, if I see that just that little twinkling, what I will say is, like, okay, look at that, look, whatever that is, and our hope is that they're with the Father right now. And I just focus on, just keep that hope, hold on to that hope, hold on to that hope. In the meantime, what that does, and it has done, is those people that hear this, then if they're then questioning, well, do I have that hope? Well, then that's a good opportunity to share Jesus with them and everything. But if there are people that that just aren't, they're not. I mean, you don't want to give that family false hope. But at the same time, what you got to do is not abruptly, but just shift their attention a little bit off of, like, the individual. Like, you can grieve for them, and you can, because grief is just learning how to deal with loss. I mean, that's the whole process of grieving. So understand, like, you should grieve for them, but you should also, there should be a grieving for yourself in this. It's directional. Well, because of this situation, what has been brought up? What do you need to deal with? And just helping them navigate that, and not in a big swift term, but gently going through that. And that's that's one of my biggest downfalls I've had throughout my career is early on, like, oh, I know the answer, doggone it. Well, then you go in a bull in a china shop and just wreck everything because, yeah, you know what's right, but it's, you remember the Cosby Show when we were growing up?
Yeah.
Remember when one of the daughters, I think it was the not the youngest daughter, but the second youngest daughter. She was off at college, and she brought this this guy home that they were engaged to get married. He was a little bit older, but he was a maintenance man at the college or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with the maintenance man, but make a long story short, they were sitting at the dinner table, and the family never met this guy, and all of a sudden they say, "Hey, we're getting married." And then Bill Cosby goes on this little example, and he says, "All right, I can't remember the guy's name. We'll just call him Fred for right now. All right, Fred, I got what's your favorite food?" He said, "Oh, I like me a good steak." And they start talking about steak and how it was cooked, and it's just so juicy and everything. And he says, "You know, this steak." Bill Cosby says, like, imagine this steak being served to you on a trash can lid. Like, would it be as appealing to you then? Like, yeah, it's all good and awesome, but the presentation matters. So you can have,
Interesting.
yeah, like you can have the best, juiciest information, but if you take and deliver it on a trash can lid that has bug guts and last week's baby diaper goo, and it's not as enticing. So when we think about like we have the truth, and we shouldn't not share it, but I think there's a way in which to share it, and especially in these times of traumatic events and stuff like that, you can't just come in. And I've seen it. I've seen pastors do it at funerals and everything, and they get up there and they're, "Y'all need to turn or you're going to burn. Like your brother Johnny here who's in this casket." I mean, like, I'm like, oh my goodness. What good are you doing right now?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we shouldn't give false hope. So there has to be a balance. And that's why I think that not everybody's cut out to do things like what you're doing or things like what I'm doing, because it's not all about hitting nails and, hammering in nails all over the place. No, it's how do we navigate people's lives? People's lives are messy. And then when these events come up, they're even messier and ugliness comes out. And, I don't know if you have yet, but there's going to be times you're going to obviously encounter somebody, they're going to cuss you out one minute, and then they're going to be crying on your shoulder the next. It's because they don't know how to deal with all of this. So from the spiritual side, it's like I want to help them advance in their faith journey. So what that means is, like, that's my whole mission, is help people advance, make progress in their faith journey, whether they have faith or they don't. Well, if they don't have faith, it's making that progress to have faith. If they do have faith, it's helping them strengthen their faith. And that's, there's no secret, no secret formula, secret message, sauce, or anything. That's what the spiritual element of healing is. It's helping them get closer and closer and closer to Christ, because as we get closer to Christ in our relationship with Him, yes, there's more light in our life, and then we see what obstacles are in our way, so that we can then heal from different things. So,
and it's crazy, and you talk about the light,
mm-hmm.
like, I'll go into a fire department and I'll show these guys a little bit of love.
mm-hmm.
And mind you, they got the walls up, the tough exterior, right?
Yeah.
They're the stone cold killers.
Mm-hmm.
And you show them a little bit of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, they flock to it.
Yeah.
Like a moth to a flame.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you know, you see them a month later, you stop down, and you got guys hugging you now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I get my satisfaction, not in the hugs, right?
No, yeah.
No, but bringing that light.
Oh, yeah.
And showing them a little bit of love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tell these guys, you got to love your brothers and sisters that you work with.
Yeah.
You have to.
Mm-hmm.
You're around these people more than you are your family.
Yeah. For sure.
And when we're divided, like a house divided will not stand, and there's a lot of that in the fire service, right? You get politics, and you'll get a lieutenant or a captain that's promoted. Now everything changes. Now you have camps in the fire department, you know, and people are against each other, you know. But I think if you can come in and show these guys that, hey, you are loved. You know what? I do give a crap if you're alive or dead.
Yeah.
Like, it matters to me. Like, I care about that, you know. And then you let them know that they're not alone, you know. I'll have people tell me, you know, I've been having nightmares, and am I going crazy? And I'll just say, no, you're not crazy. It's normal. This is a sign and symptom of PTSD. And I explain to them the pathology behind that and why and how that happens in the brain. And I tell them I have nightmares too, screaming nightmares, just about every night.
Yeah.
And I have for years, you know. But you're not crazy. You're not crazy. And sometimes that's all a person needs to hear.
Yeah.
Right? And they're afraid to talk to their coworkers because they don't want to be labeled as weak. I mean, you might get your gear hung up in the hose tower, right?
I don't know all the intricacies of the fire service when it comes to that.
You know,
water in their boots or something.
Yeah, you know, and you know, they're afraid. They're afraid to emote. They're afraid to talk about that stuff. You know, and one thing I just want to make it like I want to normalize it.
Yeah.
Right, and there's a lot of people, they do what I do, and you know, we're gonna fight the stigma, right? And that's the stigma.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that when you can bring the brotherhood back in, you know, and I question it sometimes. I'm like, oh well, we're a brotherhood, and I'll think, and I go back to when I worked and in situations, I'll be like, are we though?
Yeah.
Are we? You know what I mean? And I'll ask that of the fire department, and I'll be like, are you guys? Are you guys a brotherhood? You know, and I'll see some guys will put their heads down, and other guys are like, yeah, you know what I mean?
Right.
But, you know, like, you know, and that's important. But I think, you know, when you have, like, a government agency, or even, like, in a prison, right, there's no love really there.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? It's, like, void of it. Like it's almost like it's not allowed.
I went to the jail the other day. Well, actually, it's been a couple weeks now, and even the guards in there, they just seem like they're in prison. And then there was a sheriff deputy sitting over here at the fire station like a couple days later, and I was talking to him, and I told him about that, and he's like, it's prison, just some are on or behind the bars and some are on the outside of the bars. But it's all like the same thing you're saying. Like, it's void of that love and that the light. There needs more light. I've encountered people too that they don't know how to receive love, and so they're combative sometimes when you're trying to give them love, and they push back because they don't know how to receive it. And that's just, we have to work with them a little bit more because that compounds the whole situation. Like what you're trying to do is like you want to help them get through like a tough time, this traumatic event, but then they don't know how to receive love, and it's just, it's like pouring gas on the fire,
Right.
And just you've got to keep on working and keep on loving. The Bible says love covers a multitude of sins.
Amen.
And that's it. That's it.
I tell people, I say, with this mission that I'm on, as dark as the work can be, and it can be dark. You know what I mean? Sometimes you get immersed into some pretty crappy diapers. It's really one and only the biggest bright spot of my life.
Yeah.
As ironic as that is, but that's how God works.
Yeah. He works in some crazy ways. And that's awesome. I'm excited to be a part of what you're doing.
Yeah, and I appreciate all your help.
Oh man,
you're a wealth of knowledge, a treasure trove.
I don't know. Don't tell me that. My head might get too big. I won't get out the door.
Right. But there is a spiritual side to healing.
100%.
And we cannot ignore that.
No, not at all.
We can't.
Because you're not going to be whole then.
No, you won't.
2/3 is not full.
No.
So.
And as unpleasant it is for some of these agencies to hear that when I go in, I still say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an important part, And it's funny because I do this little experiment with guys. I make them put a little thermometer on their pinky and get a skin temperature. There's actual medical chart that will say, based on your skin temperature, is your anxiety level.
That's interesting.
And they can't hide. Right?
Oh, yeah. How are you going to
They can't. I have them call their numbers out, right? You know, and you get a lot of guys 60s, 70s, and I'm like, oof. Oh, man, you are stressed out. You go and you grab their hand, and it's ice cold, you know.
So the higher the temperature, the better? Or
No, better.
Better.
Higher,
So the lower the temperature, more anxiety?
Stress. Yeah, so what's happening, really? So when you're really in a high state of anxiety, your whole body's clamping down, right? So you're vasoconstricting.
Yeah.
So obviously the tip of your nose, your hands, your feet are going to be freezing. So I tell guys, if your hands are ice cold, right, and it's not related to, you know, making a snowman.
Okay, yeah,
right? You're stressed out. And let that be your measure. That's how you can tell, right?
So what about when my wife puts her feet on me at night and they're ice cold? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, she's stressed out.
No, I'm stressing her out. Oh, dang.
Yeah.
That's good.
Right? You know, you're vasoconstricted. Your body is tight.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's taking all the blood and putting it to your core and in your brain.
Okay.
Is like a survival thing, right? So you're really in like survive mode.
Yeah.
At that point, you're walking around, adrenaline's flying through your veins. You know, you're stressed. You know, and that's how it manifests. But it's real interesting. So then later on, you know, I touch on prayer and meditation, right? And everybody has this preconceived notion that meditation, we're going to sit Indian style and, you know, right? You know, and it's not that.
Yeah.
You know, and I teach guys like your meditation can be mowing your lawn on your tractor and listening to music and focusing on something good in your mind. You know, it could be riding your motorcycle. It could be just reading a book, or it could be like my meditation because I'm lazy. I just lay down on my bed and I stare at the ceiling and then I'll close my eyes and I'll relax, right? So I take them through this like 10-minute meditation exercise, right? You know, I do the whole thing, you know, we're going to relax our hair. And now we're going down our head. Now we're relaxing our ears, you know, the whole bit, right? We get them relaxed, right? And then I have them look at their thermometer. And everyone's skin temperature has gone up dramatically after that meditation.
Dang.
And they can look at me and say, you know, you're crazy, this is hokey, this is stupid, whatever, Freeborg's an idiot. At the end of the day, the numbers don't lie.
You have the receipts.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't lie, bro. The data is right there.
Yeah.
And there it is, you know, but everyone clams up when I get into the prayer and meditation part. Right? Now, I run into, you know, believers and people of faith in the fire service. They're there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of guys, they clam up when I start talking about that. I'm not going to meditate. That's, you know, that's what you do, you know. You know.
I ain't going to pray. That's what the preacher does.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and
or my grandma. Or
well, guess what you can do? Like you can literally affect the physiology of your body.
Yeah.
So it's all connected. It's all connected. Like your mind is connected to your stomach. Good nutrition will affect your mental health. You know, it all works together. And it's those three parts again. You have your mental, your physical, and spiritual side. Yeah. And I literally proved to these guys that the spiritual side heals in that little experiment. And it's funny because they can't talk any smack after that.
I love it.
Right? I know.
It. Yeah, awesome.
It's like checkmate, right? But
drop the mic.
Yeah. So Lee, you got to tell me about your time in Israel.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
So, where do I start? It all started with, I met up with a Christian author by the name of Cliff Graham. He's got some really, he took some time off, and I don't know if he's back in, but anyways, he, through his books, I would read his books and everything. He was a Christian fiction author. He wrote a lot about David, and kind of like, he even said, like, I'm taking like the Bible and like filling in the stories. This isn't inspired, but just kind of a fictional way of like what went on in camp and all this stuff. Great stuff. Anyways, he was involved in rescuing victims of sex trafficking. So he started a little group called Gaborim. And what these are just guys who are like-minded that want to be involved in helping rescue, go on some rescue missions and stuff like that. So we went through a bunch of training, and actually we did some operations here in the United States. Went out to Sturgis. I went to Sturgis for the first time. The big.
Oh wow, the bike rally.
Oh my goodness, that was nuts. Total. That's a different world. But anyways, did that. We're informants for the police and stuff like that. Then from there, later on, I went to Israel right there, 2019, and we did training over there in Israel because. Especially now, people can see more what goes on over there. There are these camps. They're called Bedouin camps. They're like basically squatters in the land, all through like where we were was in the Judean desert, and it's a pipeline for bringing traffic, not even just girls, but young boys and whatever people through that area there. So we went and did some desert training, just some like survival stuff and everything like that. But then interacted with how to interact with those Bedouins and what to look for, hostile and friendlies and stuff like that. So spent some time doing that. Learned a lot, learned a ton, but had on the spiritual side. All of that. I mean, everything in all the operations and maneuvers, whatever, everything we did, the best part was that the moment that we finished everything and we climbed up on this mountain, and it was from this mountain you could see the Dead Sea. And you just sit up and you just look out over all of this land. This is all the Judean desert, and you're looking at the Dead Sea, and you turn around and you can see like the desert where David was chased by Saul, and like all of these things you read about in the Bible, and just you just not only have a feeling of awe, but there's peace that everything in which we're doing, and I know that the sex trafficking stuff is huge, and there's great work into doing that, and I applaud the people who have done stuff or do stuff like that. I mean, we used to, I can say it now, we used to have a safe house here at the church for a few years for that, before COVID happened. So we've rescued 37, I think, 37 or 38 women from sex trafficking, brought them here and helped get them where they needed to go. But, that's all great and good, and I think there's a purpose for that. But that inner peace, just being able to sit up there in the land that where Jesus walked, and all this stuff that we read about, like that peace is just amazing. And that's that spiritual side in which you're saying. Like, so did we? I mean, is there some monumental moment while I was in Israel and what we did? Yeah, there are things that we did. Some of the training with the Matkal unit, which is like their special forces. We trained with the Israeli special forces guys and everything. Them teaching us some stuff about terrain, and like it's nuts. Like you're out there and like, okay, you don't have any water. You got to find water, and you're like I'm in the middle of a desert. Well, then they take and show you how to read these special topographical maps and look at that hill over there and look at this feature and then you go over there and there's this cistern. It's all hidden. Like you'd never ever, but there's a cistern. It could have been there from biblical times. Like this is the crazy thing. So all of that stuff's cool. I think the coolest thing was honestly, just sleeping under the stars. So we were there in January, and so it's like the winter time, but it's not terribly cold like it is here. But anyways. It was like sleeping under the stars, just in a sleeping bag, and looking up at the same stars, the same moon, and everything that like David and like obviously the same stars and moon we see here, but from you're in a wadi, so a dried out riverbed, and just looking up in this land, it's like this is just amazing. Talk about peaceful, and the spiritual heaviness of all this, like, this is just good stuff.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, the experiences and the people and all that stuff was cool too. But I am more in. I'm not as much into exercises and events as I am into, like, where's God in all this, and that's where he's at. It was awesome.
Right. You know, that's a question I ask myself now a lot. Where's God in all this?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And I can usually find a silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's good.
I find him.
You got to.
One way or another.
Yeah, and then just help people find it.
Yeah.
That's it.
You know, and I want guys to know
mm-hmm.
that, you know, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this chair talking to you today if I didn't have my faith. Because I would have been completely devoid of hope. Any shred of hope I've had in this life has come from the Father.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm right there with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love how you're saying, you know, Jesus has this ministry of healing, and mm-hmm. he's a healer, and mm-hmm. You know, and he's my ground zero.
Yeah.
For healing things, and you know, I just wish that, you know, I do this whole mission
mm-hmm.
really because I don't want people to feel like I feel. I mm-hmm. don't want them to suffer.
Yeah.
Like I suffer. But at the same time, I want them to feel the good things that I feel.
Yeah.
Through my faith, you know. And that's where I get my satisfaction in life,
mm-hmm.
you know. And there are so many times where, just out of my own idiocy, mm-hmm. even when I was a kid, like I should have been dead 50 times over,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know. And I asked myself, I'm like, you know, there has to be a reason. Somebody was watching out for me.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yeah.
Somebody was looking after me. Even when I worked in the fire service, there was a couple calls. I was probably close to dying or being really severely injured,
mm-hmm.
you know. And by the grace of God,
mm-hmm.
like, I mean, crazy stuff. I was on a 2-story colonial. We were fighting a chimney fire. We were trying to take apart the chimney and get it knocked. So it was seated down in, and it was extending into that whole exterior wall of the mm-hmm. house. And it was like -10 out, of course, at night. All the spray is freezing. The roof is ice. You know, you're up there. You got your pack. You got this heavy hose line, right? Mm-hmm. 1.75 going up 2 stories. There's a lot of weight there, you know. And I'm struggling to hold this line, and it's icy, and I had a kid at the ladder, and he was supposed to back me up on the line. Just hold the line. I told him, just hold it.
Mm-hmm.
Take some of that weight off me so I don't go sliding, you know, down this roof. And as soon as that chimney started to come down, the kid's like, I'm out of here. And he lets go of the line, Lee, right? And that hose just starts pulling me down. I spiderweb on the roof. Like Spider-Man, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh crap. And I'm holding this heavy line. It's just pulling me off this roof. And I didn't want to let go of the line because, oh my God, Lee, the nozzle and that weight, that hits somebody, bam. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
2 stories. Finally, I get towards the end, and I'm like, literally my life is flashing before my eyes at this point. I'm like, I'm going to die at this -10-degree day. This stupid roof.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going down, you know, make my body floppy. That's what I was thinking at that point. Be floppy. Be floppy, freeboard. You know what I mean? Just, you know, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
Be ready. And I let go of that line, and of course, whoosh, there it goes. And I'm going down this roof, man. And I'm just, and my toes get caught in the gutter. It stopped me. I was like this close, you know? To going over that roof. I mean, I could have survived it, but it would have been bad. I could have been paralyzed. You know, who knows? But in those moments, like, I cannot think that, like, the Father intervened. In that.
And why did he?
Why?
Because he's got purpose for you. He's got a plan for you.
You know, and I know that there's a million people out there with stories like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there were so many times I was a wild child. Mm-hmm. And I remember these guys had thought that we had robbed them. We didn't. We were just at this party, and they were chasing us. They had guns. It was like 6 a.m. I'm running through downtown Akron, hopping these fences, and they're in this car. And I remember I was running towards this. It was like a 10-foot wooden fence. I'm just a kid, like 18, you know. And privacy fence, wooden, you know, and it's kind of got the, you know, points, right? And as I'm running this fence, I hear pop, 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 pop. And I literally see the bullets hitting the fence in front of me as I'm running towards it. And like the wood splinters go,
yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to die. To this day, I don't know how the hell I got over that fence.
Right.
I don't know. I got over that fence, Lee.
Wow.
Because I probably just, you know, Superman, you know, adrenaline, who knows?
Yeah.
But I got over this 10-foot privacy fence, like, bam, right over it and ran, you know, and that's a trauma I still have to this day.
Yeah.
Like, I can hear the sound, and this is funny, the thing with PTSD. And if you sit in any of these, you know, critical incident stress debriefings too, you'll see that the worst part, you know, you'll ask a guy, you know, what was the worst part of that call? What is in your mind the most? And it's funny, it's usually a sound, a smell, a taste, or a feeling.
Smell's the big one for me.
Me too.
I can still, to this day, I can still smell that burnt flesh smell.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I tell people I know what a car accident smells like. Do you?
Yeah.
They look at me funny. I go, no, there's a smell. And then, you know, there'll be a cop or someone. I know the smell you're talking about exactly, right? And it's, yeah, there's a smell to it, you know. But that's what our brain focuses on. And that's where the trauma, like, seats in the brain. It's pretty weird how that happens. But with me, it was the sound of the bullets hitting that fence in the wood, just splintering. I'll remember that forever. Can't get it out of my mind.
Yeah.
You know? But I can tell you, I guess the bigger point of all that is that, you know, God has protected me, you know, and I'll put it to guys that are serving in the fire service or law enforcement, you know, and all you got to do is ask them, right? You know, like, did you ever die? Like, you ever come close? Like, what was, right? And they'll tell you their story. Everyone's got one, right? And then you ask them, well, do you ever think about the why? And they look at you funny and you're like, why didn't you die?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever think about that?
Yeah.
You think it was just freak chance?
No.
I don't.
No.
Nothing is by mistake.
No, there's no such thing. It's kind of like, you ever watch NCIS? With
I know.
Leroy Jethro gives these there's no such thing as coincidence. I believe the same thing. Like, there's no such thing as coincidence.
No.
I'm not saying God causes everything, but God knows everything, and He allows things here and there, or doesn't allow things. Like, no, kind of like the story of Job in the Bible, and Satan's tormenting Job, and God says, "Don't kill him." Well, why did Job go through all of that? Well, at the end, excuse me, you see that it's all about faith, and just that restoration that happens, that when we have that faith in God, and our spiritual part of all of this is healed and comes through Him. It's an awesome thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I wish, I wish that, I wish I could bring as many people to the light as I possibly can.
Well, it's not a wish.
You know?
You should say it's you hope you can.
Yeah.
Because the hope in which we have, because the wish is something that might not come true, but a hope is certain. Well, the hope that we have in Christ is certain, and if that's our goal, that's asking for things in Jesus' name. Like, you know, that's asking for things in line with His will. Because you know, it says that God doesn't desire that any man should be lost; that all should come to repentance and faith in Him. Oh.
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
So, what would you say? And I know this is broad; it's a tall order.
Okay. So, is this the final question of the
Okay.
What would I say?
What would you say to a struggling first responder?
So,
It's in the midst of the storm of a century, right? They're an alcoholic,
Okay.
Right? They're going through a divorce.
Okay. What would I
They're
say?
having problems at work.
I would ask them first a question, and the question would be, who do you have? What I mean is, one is who's in their life that they have a significant value in, or that person has a significant value for them. So who do you have? If we've talked plenty of times before, your grandkids or your world.
Yes.
Yeah. If I were to ask you, who do you have? Well, I got my grandkids, and I got my wife, or I got my, okay, whatever. Who do you have? And then what are you worth to them? So if it's not, so it's taking the focus off of themselves and showing yes, we need to love ourselves. And if you don't love yourself, take your focus off what about your grandkids? What is your worth to them? Because they're worth a lot. Their value to you is great. So if you were to do something in one of those dark times that was to deprive them of their connection, their relationship with you, who do you have? Focus on who's around you. So, and help them get out of that. I'm isolated. I'm all by myself. No, who do you have around you? And then it would just be a continual conversation to show them that if they say, well, I don't have anybody. Well, that's not true, because this is what God says. He says he'll never leave us or forsake us. If we are in relationship with him, or our faith is in him, that I'm not going to ever be gone from you, is what he says. So it's not, I don't think that there's a hard and fast in it, but I would say go to that the question of value. Who do you have in your life? And see where you go from there.
My friend, I always learn from you, and I appreciate you tremendously.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I learn from you as well. I love learning, and I'm not a smart man. I'm not a smart man. Yeah, but I like to communicate, and I like to transfer knowledge, in which I do pick up here and there. And if I can be of use and of service, I want to do that. So I'm so pumped for what you're doing. So I want to
thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being on board and
and
everything you're doing. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah,
it's gonna be amazing.
God's gonna do some work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're a responder that's struggling and you need to talk to someone, or if you're interested in a training at your fire department about PTSD and suicide and addiction and divorce, feel free to reach out to us through our website, www.riseupfight.com. And if you're willing to be so kind, we appreciate any donation to keep this mission afloat so we can keep doing this work. We don't charge people. We do this all pro bono, and we rely on your kindness and your gifts. And please, if you're interested in donating, we're a 501c nonprofit. Your donation is tax deductible, and you can make that donation through our website at www.riseupfight.com. Just click on the donation link, and you'll be set. And we appreciate you. We appreciate your time, and thank you for listening.